Thank you so much, Maria, and for this invitation. And I'm really grateful to be part of this discussion today. I mean, it's really great already to listen into the first two interventions, and honestly, it's hard to follow actually Lale's very touching intervention. I mean, I really feel that she really presented very much what it means to be a woman in such a crisis context. So thank you very much, Lale, for that. So, let me shortly introduce myself. So Maria already mentioned I'm the Deputy Director at the WFP Global Office in Berlin. I've been working with WFP in the field at headquarters, etc., different duty stations since 2004. So it's really been part of my life. I would like to start talking a bit about the current humanitarian context we are working in, to then talk a bit more about how this affects specifically women. So the world is facing really a food crisis of unprecedented proportions, the largest humanitarian crisis really since World War II. And to give you a few figures, we have currently 345 million people acutely food insecure across 82 countries, and this is really a really dramatic increase. So we still had at the beginning of the year we were talking about 282 million people acutely food insecure, and in 2019 it was still 135 million people, meaning that since 2009 the number has actually tripled. And not only that, we also have now up to 50 million people in 45 countries that are right on the edge of famine. So they're really at risk being tipped over if they don't receive humanitarian support into famine-like conditions. And famine is already projected in parts of Somalia now, and over 970,000 people are already struggling for survival in famine-like conditions. So that's the IPC 5 that we're talking about. So this is in Somalia, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Yemen, etc. So that's 10 times more than 5 years ago. And women and girls are disproportionately affected by this situation. So nearly 32% of women globally are moderately or severely food insecure, and that's compared to 28% of men being food insecure. So this gender gap is actually widening. So it was in 2019, it was 1.8% difference. Now it's up to 4.3%. So this shows how this crisis is really affecting women and girls much more than it is affecting men. Let me talk a bit of the drivers. Why are we facing this crisis right now? So there's conflict, there is the climate changes, there is COVID-19, rising costs, and all of these factors are intertwined. So Ukraine and Russia are amongst the biggest wheat and fertilizer exporters in the world. Before the war, Ukraine was actually producing food for 400 million people. So now, as a result, food prices are up 15% in 67 countries, and it has hit, obviously, who has it hit most? The import-dependent countries such as Lebanon, as Yemen, countries in Eastern Africa. For example, Somalia was importing 100% of its wheat from Ukraine. And also these high prices and falling living standards are sparking further social unrest, as we are seeing first signs in Haiti and Sri Lanka, in Chad and other countries. And at the same time, the costs increase. So our World Food Programme's monthly operating costs are up 28.3 million compared to per month. compared to the beginning of the year. So it means that actually we can reach less people with the same funds. So costs are also having a huge impact. And meanwhile, also the climate crisis, I already mentioned that before, is actually disrupting the lives of millions, and specifically also impacting the upcoming planting season due to drought, as we have seen in the Horn of Africa, in India, and actually we are at risk that by the end of the century, 30% of global food production will be reduced if we don't actually work on the emissions. So looking at COP27, where we're discussing these issues right now. The fertilizer shortages caused by Ukraine conflict will also further have an impact. Without the fertilizer in 2022, there may be not enough food in 2023, and we may be facing a food availability crisis. Now, let me come to the connection between food security and gender equality. They're closely interlinked. Gender inequality limits women's access to sufficient and nutritious food. And at the same time, women play such a critical role in the global food production and food systems. So there are 150 million more food insecure women than men in the world, which is 8.4 times higher than in 2018. So there has been also a development. And what's the reason? The reason is actually that women and girls have fewer opportunities to acquire food production assets, are also less connected to the food value chains, and they own less land. So and even if the landholders are women, the yields for women farmers are 20 to 30% lower than for men. And that's not from a lack of skill, but it derives from women's lower access to loans, agricultural inputs such as machines, and also the productivity of the land that they are actually able to access. And at the same time, so coming back, women are really at the center. They produce 60 to 80% of the food in most developing countries. So eliminating gender inequality between women and men farmers around the world would actually increase the agricultural productivity. We're estimating between 2.5 to 4%. And that would directly lead also to a 12 to 17% reduction in global hunger. So we need to use the potential of women. When the root causes of the gender inequality are addressed, the entire society's benefit. It's not about only women benefiting, it's about the society's benefiting. So we need to put women at the center of our programs. Let me talk a bit about what WFP is doing. So in 2021, directly assisted 68 million women and girls, and that's compared to 60 million men and boys. So there is a focus on women. Our gender policy goals are to achieve the equitable access to and the control over food security and nutrition. And this is like we're expanding assessments, implementation and monitoring activities to respond to the food distribution dynamics within the households. We're also looking at addressing the root causes of gender inequalities, and looking also at the barriers that different household members have to access actually food security, food and nutrition, and also we are trying to advance the economic empowerment of women and girls. And in some of the contexts we're working in, it's extremely important to look at women and girls, but it's also extremely difficult. So I traveled to Yemen this summer and visited some of our programs, and also spoke to women and girls that are active, that are in NGOs, in different institutions. And I mean, what we can see is actually women and girls have been disproportionately impacted by the conflict in Yemen. So they have severely reduced access to economic and public participation, education, and health in comparison to men. Let me share some really alarming figures. Yemen has the largest income gap in the world. So Yemeni women's income is only 7% that of men. And also in the workplace representation is at an all-time low of about 8%. And obviously also the educational attainment gap is huge. It's about 72%. So, and also there is a huge, I mean, the women there, they would like to participate in the current political situation. So, but the current government was formed in the complete absence of women. So, and there's no women in ministerial position. Female representation is just at 0.3%. They're not there and they don't get access. And then we also face, actually with our restrictions of humanitarian access, they are now implementing in the north the mahram practice. That means that women can only travel accompanied by a male member of their household. And this is actually limiting, even for our staff, for our female staff, the opportunities to travel and to actually do their jobs, because they're not allowed to fly alone on the humanitarian planes. So that means that they're actually not able to do what they're supposed to do. So we are in negotiations with the government. So it really has an impact also on the humanitarian access we have in the country. So this has also a huge impact on food security. So just the question, like, how can we actually work in such an environment? So we're trying to enhance gender equality and women empowerment in our program design, and also in the activity implementations. So one way to do that is to actually prioritize households headed by women for assistance where possible, so that actually women are receiving the assistance and have the decision-making power in the household. Then we have specific nutrition programs that are targeting 2.5 million pregnant and lactating women, which is really having an impact. And then one area where we also really need to look at is schools, where girls are receiving education, which is really what they need for their future. So now 46% of our school feeding beneficiaries in Yemen are girls, and the retention rates have increased. So really these school feeding programs are giving an incentive to families to have their girls attend school and so attain an education. Then we have food for training activities, where specifically there's a focus on women, and they're really 90% of our beneficiaries are female. So it's really targeting women, and they are receiving food in order to if they conduct a training. So there's different income generating opportunities, tailoring, beekeeping, food processing, etc., so that they are actually and their basic and marketable skills are improved to create their own livelihoods. We have other situations where we have in other country programs, we foster women's economic empowerment through our cash programs. And for example, there's one example I just want to give. In Bangladesh, WFP supports the digitalization of cash transfer, social protection programs, and by which the cash transfer goes directly to a women's bank account or a mobile money account. So the funds are coming to in the hands of women, and this has increased and enhanced women's digital and financial inclusion and economic empowerment. So these are a few examples, and sorry if I've been a bit longer than expected. These are really topics that are quite complex, and there's a lot going on. I think we can really achieve a lot jointly, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the other panel speakers regarding the needs of girls and women in their specific context. Thank you so much.